So the Heat are going through some struggles right now. They went on a 4 game win streak, even though, they started out with a bunch of COVID issues and all that stuff. And also, you got to remember, man, they were really banged up in the finals. They sustained a lot of injuries to damn near half their team during the finals run. Bam was out for a bit. Goran was out for the entire thing. I don't know why they put him back in game 6. I thought that was a really dumb idea. Jimmy Butler, that famous picture where he's just tired as shit. That's a famous picture, obviously, as well. Very short off season, and then you have the COVID issues. It was just a recipe for disaster, essentially. But they came back with more people in the lineup. They went 4 straight. But when you look at who they really beat, it's a bunch of garbage teams. They beat the Wizards once. They managed to edge out the Knicks twice in really close games. Now, the Knicks aren't garbage, but the Knicks are mostly beating pretty bad teams right now. And that's because the East is pretty trash record-wise. And it's actually kind of disgusting how bad it is. Low-key makes you nauseated. They also beat a Rocket squad, which I think by then didn't even have... I don't even think they had C. Wood at that point. They've been really struggling without Christian Wood. But now they've dropped 2 in a row to 2 very good teams, the Jazz and the Clippers. But the thing is, the Clippers were missing virtually all of their main starters. PG, Kawhi both out, Batum out, and I believe Serge was out too. They let Marcus Morris basically take over the game and drop 32 on them. So what that tells you is they got to have better defense. They are letting some of these opponents score too much. The Jazz are a really good regular season team. I doubt they'll do anything in the playoffs. But they're doing really good in the regular season. So those are tough teams. But, they play the Warriors tomorrow. That's really a toss-up game. I could see the Warriors winning that. You got the Lakers coming up. Don't sleep on the Thunder. They could definitely beat you. The Raptors. These are games you can potentially lose. And so there's a lot of Heat fans who are basically sounding the sirens right now. And, rightfully so, but a lot of people are saying, hey, it's the East. You look at the East standings, it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, they're 2.5 games back just to be, I think, in the 4 seed. In the 4 seed, they're literally 2.5 games back. The Celtics are 13-3 at the 4, which is so disgusting. Because if you go over to the West, the 4 seed is 17-9. That's actually remarkable. I mean, you're talking about a better record than, almost all of the teams, except for the 76ers. And that's really the same record, essentially. I mean, which percent? Actually, no. I mean, the Suns have a higher win percentage than the Sixers do. So the 4 seed is really above everybody in the Eastern Conference, which is really, it's unfair because it means teams can miss out. It looked like there were some teams that are really going to make a push, and there still could be some, but that Christian Wood injury, I feel like, really messed up the Rockets. The Pelicans are really underachieving pretty heavily. Mavericks are a little bit in trouble, so we're going to see what happens there. But the Warriors are 15-3 at the 8th spot. So that's pretty terrible. The difference between an 8 and a 4 is massive because 4 gives you a home court series. You play a 5. 8, you're playing the best regular season team, which is basically an out like 80+% of the time. So it's a pretty big difference. So people are saying, hey, don't overreact. I think it's pretty much time to overreact. With the way the Heat are losing games right now and they're winning games just by slight amounts of numbers, they're beating the Knicks by 2 points, or losing to the Wizards by 3. This is not something that's good. You do have this is a tough stretch coming up. When you look at these teams they're playing, these are good teams that they're playing. They could certainly lose more than they win. So I would be worried. And when you start out behind, it's big trouble. So the question really comes down to, was not trading for James Harden a mistake? Now, this is a pretty big asking price. They wanted Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Precious, Kendrick Nunn, salary filler, 2 first-round picks, 4 pick swaps. But Miami was like, what the fuck? That's way too much shit, so we're not going to do it. But the thing is, I think that this was the early request, and I think if they had been more persistent and waited longer, they probably could have got the asking price down. Now, this is a bit much, but I think that I do believe, with Jimmy Butler being the guy on there, Bam is considered untouchable. And the fact that Bam isn't included in this, I think, is pretty big, and I think it would have been worth it. Now, losing Jay Crowder was a pretty big mistake for the Heat. I don't know if Avery Bradley is going to be a good defensive piece or not. He hasn't really seemed to have been be playing, but he's supposed to be a pretty good defensive piece. I think it probably would have been worth it. It really depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to be a middle of the pack team? Because, you know, in this case, it could have been potentially addition by subtraction, even. Like, let's say the Nets really get their shit together with Harden, KD, and Kyrie. They really become a serious juggernaut, that can't be stopped. You could have got James Harden. Like, people need to understand what it means to have a player like James Harden on your team. The guy's a walking 30-40, and we see if you relegate him to the point guard role, which I don't know how they would run with Jimmy, because he kind of plays that role. He's the one getting the triple-doubles like damn near every game. But, he could run that role, or he could score a lot of points. Having a James Harden player on your team is pretty massive, and you really need stars to win playoff series. And if you have Bam still on your team, I do believe that if you pick up if you get these superstars, you can fill out the rest of the roster with good enough talent. I think Duncan and Tyler are pretty overrated right now. Tyler's been doing all right, but he does have some off shooting nights. Most importantly, it's the defense that's really bad there. But I do think that this bubble run did make Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson pretty overrated. You really have to ask yourself, if you're the Heat, what do you want to do? Jimmy Butler's 31. He's realistically only got, probably in terms of real contention, I mean, is Jimmy Butler going to be contending for the finals win, 3-4 years from now? Probably not. So I think you would get, hopefully 2 to 3 years out of a Harden-Butler duo. And you could fill out the roster with other good pieces. So I do think that not getting Harden was a mistake. Now, it may be wrong in the future, but I just don't see the Heat being able to even beat the Bucks. I can see them getting past the Celtics, because the Celtics seem to be pretty mediocre as well. Definitely not the way that the roster is currently constructed. They have to make moves here. They've got to get Brad Beal or someone. They need another star. Now, they made the finals last year, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that again. I just don't see it, especially because they lost pieces and didn't sign anybody except Avery Bradley. And he hasn't done anything yet. So you got to make moves somehow, get some important pieces. I guess they tried getting Marcus Morris really hard. It didn't work. You've got to do something if you're the Heat, especially if you're trying to make contention or you're trying to get to the conference finals. I'm not really sure what your goal is at this point, but if you don't get Brad Beal or get some multiple really good pieces, they got to focus more on defense. I don't know what their plan is. I think that they got to make moves, otherwise they're in trouble. But we won't really know whether or not the James Harden trade would have been a good trade or not. We don't know whether it would have been a good trade or not for at least 2 to 5 years to come, right? At different points you could say that a trade was good or bad, like Kyrie going to the Celtics. Everyone the first year thought it was amazing, but in reality it didn't really do anything good. It didn't really result in anything. I mean, everything that those Celtics teams did was really just the young guns in the playoffs had a good run in the weak East, and then they were hilariously humiliated in the second round in 5 games by the Bucks the following year. So, you would have thought during that Game 7 against the Cavaliers in the ECF, you would have thought, oh man, this is a great trade for the Celtics. No, it was pretty bad. So you can never really tell, but I do believe that having superstars is the most important thing, and you can fill out the roster. We're going to see how it ends up with the Brooklyn Nets, especially because they just signed Andre Roberson, so we'll see how that goes. But I do think they made a mistake. I think that Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson were just, I don't know, I just think they got overrated is what I feel like.